Kia mā kiniki ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hiahi ana ta atakura. He tira, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
Thank you, Brent. Welcome, everybody. Do we have any apologies, please? We have apologies from Councillor Katrina Hodge and Councillor Warren Mayer for their absence, and Liz Stolwick for early departure. Would somebody move that those apologies be Ben? Robbie? All those in favour? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda. Liz moved. Ben second. All those in favour? Carried. Do we have any disclosures of interest here today? No disclosures. First item, if we could call on Brent to hand the table over to you, Brent.
Thank you, Chair. So there should be a presentation there. Jordan, just go to the first slide and just hold there. Councillors, you'll all be aware that one of the Chief Executive's key performance indicators includes the need to provide information through to each of the standing committees over which parts of the business they reside, if that's the right way to put it. The opportunity for you to sort of inquire a little bit more deeply into the functions of those businesses that report through to you for the purpose of having leading, I think, is the right language, conversations at the LTP table. So each committee has a little bit more of a deeper dive into the purpose, the functions, and then the costs of service delivery. And so you'll probably be familiar with these in other committees. You would have had one that came through the Resilience Committee that you would have been on, you would have chaired, Keith, so you'll be familiar with these reports coming through. So the Environmental Performance Committee has key responsibilities around the oversight of the region's reporting and monitoring on state of the environment and overseeing the effectiveness of our regulatory responsibilities. So the first of those is overseen by our Science and Information Directorate. So you have two directorates that report through to this committee, our Science and Information Directorate, our SPI Directorate, and our Resource Use Directorate. To keep things tidy for councillors, all of the work programs that come through our Science and Information Directorate that Tracy May leads will come through the policy committee, so they'll come through your committee, Ben. So I'm not presenting on that today. The deeper dive into the work of our science team and our policy team will come through the policy committee. What we talk about today is the work program within the resource use group. And to that end, I've got the section managers of each of the sections in the Resource Use Directorate behind you today. So where there are questions of detail when they come, they will be ready for them. So if we pop on to the first slide. So most of you will be pretty familiar with the work of the Resource Use Directorate. Its overarching responsibility is implementing Council's resource management functions, as well as our maritime functions and our Building Act functions. We have responsibilities in the civil defence space that won't be coming here today either, because that's not something that this committee oversees. Much of the work that happens in the resource consenting and resource consent compliance monitoring space is funded through user charges. This council has a funding policy around what the council expects in terms of the funding of those businesses in their totality. You'll note our compliance functions are broader than just monitoring resource consents. There's a lot of permitted activity rules that come in council's plans. There's a lot of permitted activity rules that comes in government's national environmental standards and national rules, all of which require monitoring. Until relatively recently, there haven't been funding mechanisms for those activities, but changes to legislation will provide funding mechanisms for those activities going forward. In addition to that, you'll be aware that we provide a 365-day per year, 24/7 service responding to notifications of environmental incidents from the public, averaging around 2,000 a year, a little bit more, and of course each of those incidents requires some form of response to be able to determine what's going on. Our maritime services space, you're actually going to get quite a detailed report on the work that we do in our maritime space today from our regional hub master, Chris Bredenbeck, and you'll be familiar with the work that we do across what is a considerable coastline in this region, as well as a very considerable internal waterway, which has a lot of recreation in the Waikato River and the hydro lakes. And added to that, our responsibilities at Port Takaroa, which you'll hear more about from Chris today. And every now and again, little things that pop up like the World Surf League. And whilst that was happening at the time of writing this report, Chris will be able to give you a few updates on how that progressed. We also have our community education programs. Many of you will be very familiar with the EnviroSchools program that reaches out to some 160 schools around the region, done in combination with our territorial authority partners, co-funders, and the significant work that we do with our kuta through our Kuta Waiti, Kuta Waita program, which reaches into our kuta. Significant funding from like the WRA that has committed $500,000 of the funding over the next few years. University, Well Energy Trust, a lot of co-funders of our education programs. And of course, we have our primary industry engagement program, which you'll hear from Tracy shortly. Again, this is the primary sector is incredibly important to the economic opportunities that happen within this region, and the primary sector also is has significant obligations upon them, which are increasing as we go through new government regulations around freshwater farm plans and regulations that come under Plan Change 1. And so this council has a program of work to be able to support our farming sector, our primary sector, our farmers and our growers, to be able to meet their regulatory obligations and to promote this practice. So those are the work programs. If we pop on to the next slide, just gives you a little bit of a summary of what those work programs are trying to achieve in terms of council's strategic direction. The thing I want to bring your attention to is the bottom bullet point. Fundamentally, what we're looking to try to promote is the sustainable management of natural resources. And to do that, you want to use the full spectrum of tools that are available to you. We have engagement programs, we have education programs, we have consenting, we have compliance, and we have enforcement. They collectively together are about ensuring as best we can that people are making good decisions around their use of the natural resources in the region. And so when you look at the Resource Use Directorate, look at it as a collection of activities to deliver an overarching goal of people making good long-term decisions around the sustainable use of natural resources. So if we pop on to the next slide. So we have a total of 129 staff within the Directorate. That gives you a breakdown of where they currently reside. So this is where they are budgeted in the 25-26 annual plan. Since the government has made a number of announcements around the future of the resource management system, it prompted me to have a look at how we are structured, and I have made a change to our structure. Historically, the resource consent section both processed consents and monitored compliance. The complexity of being both somebody that processes consents and monitors compliance has become more and more complex over time. So I have moved all compliance functions under one section, under Patrick Lynch. And Patrick is now in the process of looking at the structure of that section to ensure it best meets the needs of this council and the community going forward. You would have heard conversations from the Crown around the lines of significantly reducing the number of consents that are needed, but increasing the expectations around compliance. More permitted activities, but more expectation around compliance. So the expectations around compliance are growing. And so what the purpose of the structural change is to now, there will be 54 people in the compliance section. And Patrick has been tasked with that amount of resource, how can we best ensure that we achieve compliance across the region with the growing expectations that are coming from the Crown. There's also a little bit of future proofing in that the Crown has been talking about maybe at some stage in the future compliance functions not sitting with councils. You would have seen that. And this gives us the opportunity to make sure we have really embedded compliance function. A compliance function is hugely dependent on other partners. It's hugely dependent on our science team to give advice. It's dependent on our policy and consenting teams to give advice. And so we want to make sure that we've got really, really strong linkages between our compliance and the other functions of this council, should compliance move to another agency some time further down the track. So if we pop on to the next slide, and then I'll pop to questions. So this just gives you a split of the groups of activities where the funding currently, where the expenditure currently sits at a high level, and where the funding comes from at a high level. In the report, you'll see a table which has the numbers in there across the various different parts of the business, and where they're funded from. So you'll see that, for example, the group of activities, which is resource regional consents, a large proportion of the cost of delivering that service is labour. It's basically staff, and that it's funded predominantly from fees and charges. So there's lots of detail that I can provide you that sits below this, but I didn't want to overload you with detail. I'd rather give you the opportunity to inquire about what sort of information would you want to see as you're heading into the LTP, as you decide where might you want to invest more, where might you want to de-invest, where might you wish to ask questions about levels of service. For example, you'll get a really good opportunity shortly to listen to Chris Bredenbrecht tell you what we are able to do across this region right now with the resources that we have in the maritime space. And you may see the amount of work that is currently done and may need to be done in the future, and have some questions around what would be involved with being able to provide the level of service going forward that you would like to provide for the region. So with that, I shall say thank you and open up to questions, and tell my SLT to be prepared for the hard ones.
Thank you, Brent. We'll take questions first from Keith, then Jen, then...
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Brent, for your introduction. I'm just concerned about the lifting compliance to 54 personnel, and you probably know the reason why, because I'm allergic to compliance for a start. But within the Regional Council, it's been interesting, and I'm sorry if I drop you in it, Liz, but we went to farms and a farm, and the Regional Council brand is damaged, because when a vehicle goes in into the regional into a farm or something like that, it's going And that's what I'm asking Brent. I'm 54, but we have to change the culture. We have to change the effect of the brand, and what component of that will be education and just making sure that people follow the rules, and if it's a misunderstanding, get coached on that. And so it's a win-win situation rather than just sit down there with a hammer and whack them on the head.
Thanks for the question, Keith. Just to be clear with councillors, there is no increase in the number of people in compliance. Previously, under the resource consent section, there were teams that dealt with consenting and teams that dealt with the compliance of those resource consents. What's happened is that the teams that were dealing with the compliance for that resource consent, they're compliance people, they've just been moved across to sit under the sit with the other people who deal with compliance. So there's no increase in headcount. It's just all the compliance people together. What that does, it gives you the opportunity to prioritise. We have 11,000 odd resource consents in this region across 5,000 sites. We have close to 10,000 landowners. We have 4,000 dairy farms. We have a large number of dry stock farms and horticultural farms. It gives the opportunity to prioritize where the resources are applied. So it's not additional resources. Your comment about how do we, it's unfortunate because that's the sort of thing that gets into the media, the work that happens. And hopefully that's better. What works happened at the front end, and in fact, Patrick might talk about this later, because there's a person that I'd like to introduce you to actually that's sitting right to Patrick's left right now. So Michelle has joined us specifically for the sort of thing that you've described, Keith. Patrick has released one of his frontline roles to replace that with a role that Michelle is filling, which is very much around getting in front of things. So I'll leave that to Patrick when he's up in front of you later to be able to talk that through, because as I said before, we look to use the entire spectrum of tools available to us. And it is unfortunate that we still have a lot of non-compliance occurring, and we are tasked with enforcing council's rules, and that does sometimes come as one of the things when you're the regulator.
Right, Jennifer, if you...
Thank you, and thank you, Brent. Really good presentation. I like what you're doing. Everything you've described makes sense based on everything I've heard over the last 6-7 years. And I came in pretty hot on wanting more compliance, and I think that you're doing what you can with the resources that you've got, especially since I've seen comparisons to other councils now over the time as well. I'm interested about the law change around the permitted activity rate. Said it will reduce and go to user charges. Can you just explain a little bit more about the timing and the impact of that? And then, yeah, that was my first question.
Yes, so this is something that...
The context of this, yeah.
Yes, so when the Crown decided that it was going to bring in a new system to enable more things to be authorised by the way of permitted activity, you may have heard me before describe a permitted activity as simply a free resource consent. It's still got a whole bunch of conditions that require compliance, but the Crown recognised that councils didn't have an ability to go and directly charge, and so the new legislation is going to enable that. And so one of the things that Patrick and the team are working on right now is, what does the law say we can do, and then what is right to do? Because you'll be familiar from your days working under the RMA, there's the actual and then there's the reasonable. And so you have to be actual and reasonable. And so the team are working through that right now. And as part of the LTP process, Patrick will be bringing back before the council how we see a transition where you'll see the current permitted activity rate going down and user charges going up. So no increase in people, but where the funding will come from, you'll see I would say a significant reduction in the permitted activity rate and a significant increase in user charges, which is very consistent with what I know Robbie's been saying in this committee over the last 3 or 4 years. Charge those people that are the ones that are driving the work that we need to do. There's a bunch of administrative system setups that are going to need to be put in place to enable that, but that's work that's currently underway.
And the last quick one was, is there any, I'm always curious about the 80-20 split and whether that's the right number, like, versus 75, 85 or 90, because it feels kind of plucked out of the air. But I know it's not, because thinking's gone into it from your end a lot. It's always something worth looking at when there's a lot of general rate going into things.
So
any comment?
Probably pre anybody in this room, actually, it was 70-30, probably 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, and the council decided that it wanted to increase the contribution from user charges and reduce the contribution from general rates, and progressed it from 70-30 to 80-20. So that was a governance decision that they wanted to see more coming from user charges.
Thanks for highlighting that for the committee members, because this paper has come up because of a certain KPI, and this is one of the areas governance decision can be made to change some things for consideration. But there needs to be
correct, and you'll all have sat through the finance committee description around, and I know that Robbie, it's something that you've had a particular close look around how costs are allocated, how your costs are allocated, council's costs are allocated, and how they're spread out around the projects that the council has delivered. And so you will see in the table that I provided you around direct costs and
you really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So simplifying those, your directorate, is that going to make it easier for you to come to us with business cases for the LTP, for one question?
Absolutely. One of the things that, for example, when Patrick's able to look at the compliance across the totality of it, he'll be able to bring to you and say, with this level of resource, this is how much we can do. These are the risks that come when you do that amount. So I'm not sure, maybe Robbie, it was before you were on the EPC, we brought a similar paper to this committee around the work that we're able to do around consent compliance. And you looked at the amount of work that was able to be done with resources, and the governors said, that's not enough. You need to be doing more. And so this committee requested that more resources go into that space to do more, acknowledging that most of it would be funded through user charges. So it had a small general rate tail. So this will enable Patrick to come to you and say, this is what you get for this number of staff. And the same thing, it's going to enable Chris to come to you and say, this is what you get for this amount of resource in maritime. And then you can they're all risk things, eh? We can make people even safer on the water if there are more of us, but we know that there's a limit, there's a balance. And that balance call becomes the call for governance.
Yeah, but there's certain things out there in the public that some industries do that you're never going to pick up on, yet it's most probably the biggest polluter. So what are you going to do about those ones? Because that's the real, like I've had at least 20 phone calls this year of effluent being dumped on the side of the road, and I've said I can't do anything about it. You got to ring the 800 number. Yet this keeps going on. There's most probably 1,000 cows have travelled around in that truck for that couple of days. There's more effluent goes in our water systems from any dairy farm. He gets prosecuted $53,000 or $60,000, but these trucks just keep dumping the shit on the side of the road and in our waterways, and no one is accountable for it. Yet the dairy farmer is, and it's got that's the bit that unless you're going to stop those sort of things, I don't think it's really going to change how you change your directorate. Brent, sorry, because we, as a dairy farmer, we get blamed for putting that effluent in the waterways, and it is, and it's a whole different organisation, trucking companies and others that are doing it and not complying with the rules. And we already spend a fortune on these effluent dumps that now government has left for us to pick up the cost of, and we're still getting this effluent on the side of the road.
Thanks, Robbie. Oh, it's really good feedback, Robbie. That's really good, because I can see over there Patrick and Michelle both writing that down, because that's one of the opportunities that we have with the role that we have with Michelle now, is around these sorts of things and how do we get in front of those? What are our opportunities to get in front of those things? So
one truck most probably dumps more effluent in the drain than a whole dairy farm for the year. That's the bit I'm getting annoyed about. Yet we get the blame for it.
Yeah, I hear you, Robbie. So one thing I would ask though is whenever you get a call like that, please send it through. Please send it through to our incident response team. We have a team of people who are tasked with responding to these sorts of things. And so
I've done it many a time, and you know, Brent, I've sent photos in and nothing happens.
Okay, I think we've got the point taken there. Robbie, we'll move on to Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of the RMA changes, there's a shift from consenting to compliance, isn't it? The permitted activities are going to make it easier to consent. You're going to be compliance, but who's going to pay for the compliance? You've talked about increases to fees and charges, but is that going to make up the shortfall?
So there will be the same balance that you have right now, where there will be user charges, and because there is a public good element, and there's a little bit of a monopoly element. There is an appropriate contribution from all of us, but the higher contribution will be from the user. So what you'll find happening is that staff going out to monitor a permitted activity. And then the party who has been undertaking that activity will receive an invoice. Now that's going to create noise for you. No doubt about it. Whenever you start charging for something, there's a noise that will come with that. We will need to have a communication process of informing people that there is a change. Most people will be pleased because the cost for that spread will go down, but of course the cost of that spread is a relatively small cost. You know, the permitted activity rate, I can't remember right now, Patrick, is it about $60 or $70 a year, the permitted activity rate? Something Robbie probably knows. But if you get a staff member that's coming to your property for a few hours to assess your compliance and then has to come back to check your compliance again, 4 or 5 hours of time, it's there's going to be $1,000 bill coming their way, you know, and so that's going to be different, and you will expect to receive calls from people saying that there's been a cost. That's the quid pro quo that comes from having a free resource consent, because you haven't had to pay for your resource consent.
Yeah.
You will pay for the compliance, but that will not stop the noise that will come back through. It'll come back through your channels. It'll come back through to Patrick and to myself. But at the end of the day, it's either the residents and paying through the general rate, or the individual paying through charges.
So that's actually going to be quite a significant problem, isn't it? Because if I'm applying for consent, I'm actually choosing to do something and I'm willing to pay. Whereas if I'm the compliance is turned up, monitors my site, finds that it's actually somebody who's dumped effluent in the drain down the road, but I'm still getting a bill because you've turned up to assess my compliance. So the staff time is still going to be there, even if you were innocent and had no compliance issues.
And so that's exactly why Patrick has to work through a process, and we'll come back to you around that, around what are we legally allowed to do, yeah, and then what should we do. So that's the actual and the reasonable part of it. And so, for example, I'll give you getting into some detail away from you diving into the dollars and the cents, but you have a complaint. You go out and look at that complaint, and that party is exercising a permitted right and they're doing nothing wrong.
Yeah.
There may be one response that is that somebody has to pay for that time, but that time not paid for by the individual. You go out there and that person is doing something that they shouldn't be doing. You know, there's some work to go through, but the new law gives the ability for council to sheet costs back to the user, whereas currently there isn't that ability. So it's an opportunity for a more fair system, but it doesn't mean so it doesn't mean everything's going to go to users. There's always going to be this tail because, as you would have heard from Patrick before, of the number of complaints that we look into, there's a large proportion where there's nothing being done wrong.
Question from Jennifer?
No, I've got several questions here.
It's fine.
So if we go to your table of activities, permitted activity monitoring actually currently costs a total of 2.4 billion, of which 1.8 million comes from targeted rates and 500,000 from general rates. So there's $2 million there that you're going to need to start to get from compliance instead of, is that the way we should read this?
So fundamentally, that number will go down to a number which is smaller. And one of the things that we have to work through is what is if you did every single last minute that you're out there, then all of that would disappear. That's not realistic. I'm sure you realize that. And so the question then becomes, what is reasonable? And so that's the work that we're doing right now, so we can give good guidance to our staff. Because sometimes we may need, often we have the need to go out to do something, and then afterwards you figure out, well, that wasn't reasonable to charge that party, yeah? And so, but that is the opportunity to reduce that amount of targeted rate down, yes.
So you may need to get up to $2 million from compliance rather than.
So it's correct.
Okay, cool. When you come to the investigations, there's $1.8 billion costs, but most of it seems to be going through the general rate. Only 440,000 comes from other income. Does that mean we're not getting payouts? And it goes, you're in deficit all the time.
So so the other income is basically the fine revenue that comes through from the court. And so when you do an investigation, as I think Patrick has probably told you many times before, probably more than 50% of the time, Patrick, it doesn't take you towards a situation which might end you up in a court. And so you have to, you approach things with an open mind. And so you open with an open mind, and there are some things that hit the threshold, which is appropriate for it to be put before a judge. And and the income that has come through that process, we don't go hunting for a certain revenue amount. It's the revenue that is reflected in the annual plan is a reflection of what is the history told us of what the court has been providing over the years. And so that number is a history. This particular year, the other income was significantly higher than that, because you'll all be aware, Patrick has mentioned to you, I won't talk about it now, you can talk about it in public excluded with Patrick, of the one significant case that the court made a ruling on this year. But fundamentally, yes, taking prosecution action is public good. It's a public good matter, but we recognise that the court does provide some fines revenue to offset some of that public good.
19. Number of contracts.
Gary, we can't hear Ben.
Number of contractors and fixed term employees are engaged to support delivery of the work programs. You've got 129 staff. In your table of activities, where does it show the contractors? How many are there, and what is the spend?
So contractors come under a number of different categories. So in our EnviroSchools program, we have 8 contractors that deliver that for us. And so they're in the community education part. So instead of having staff delivering that, it's a more cost-effective system for contractors to deliver that service for us.
But just on that, so you've got, where you've got item number 16, you've got a list, you've got community education is 5.3, which I think,
That does include the contractors.
that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So this is great information, but it doesn't seem to show up where the contractors are, the number of contractors or the cost.
Okay, so I'll explain it, and then I can get this information to you directly, where there are contractors who are performing the functions that could be dealt with by staff, because I think that's where you're going, Ben.
Well, yeah, particularly also it's consenting and compliance functions.
So
So heavily.
I'll come to that. So in the community education space, we have contractors delivering those work programs. It's particularly relevant because those work programs are funded with external parties funding as well. So contracts need to be worded in such a way that if the $500,000 from the River Authority disappeared, you have to be able to have systems to be able to then say we can't continue with certain contracts.
So I understand.
I'm getting to you.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that it's great information, but it seems to have missed something about where are the contractors and their costs. So if we can come back with that, that'd be fine.
So I just want to tell you about the consents compliance area. This council can't afford to have on staff experts in every single different area. So you might use an ecologist for 20 hours here and a groundwater person for 50 hours here. And so what our consenting teams do is they contract out a lot of technical advice, and that time it's contracted service from your PDPs, your Tonkin and Taylors, all of that time goes across to revenue because their costs just flush through. So it's not really like there are alternatives to staff where you taking technical advice and the costs wash through to an applicant. So you'll see the other significant area of contract services is in the consenting area. And so they aren't substitutes for staff that's getting bespoke technical advice where you need it.
Yeah, and I'm just saying here, all we've got here is the activity that shows there's $11 million spent on processing. There's no breakdown, and you've told us the number of FTEs, but you haven't told us factors or. That's what I'm looking for.
So we can do that.
Yeah.
A quick one. That clients monitoring piece. That I imagine the regional sector might explore that together, because that we're not, when this law changes and we can do things, different things to each other. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, Patrick, can you talk about what's happening at, so there's
some
as you'd expect within
alignment,
Te Reo Kahika, we have different special interest groups, and one of them is our compliance enforcement special interest group that Patrick is part of. Patrick, can you share with the committee where the conversations are at within CSIG around consistency of application of the new law?
Occurs to me how unpopular the swimming pool checks are that people have to pay for. So, and hopefully the legislative change at some stage. But yeah. So while Patrick's finding a seat, I'm just talking. Let's get you a mic.
There's definitely conversation across the regional sector, but the reality is, and we just had an example yesterday of regions just go in different directions with depends on what their history has been with charging previously. What we're probably a little bit unique in respect of the balance in this region of how much there has been historically of PA focus versus consents. And so the reality is that it will end up looking quite different. Until there's very clear interpretation of this stuff, everything that comes out when you've got 16 different bodies interpreting things, you can end up with bag. And so we're trying to interpret it, apply it with our own history, what seems fair and reasonable under these circumstances with we're working. I think, can I comment a little bit broader on some of the things that you might see out of this, if that's okay? So I think what you'll see, I'll just grab one paper in front of me, is now that we've got the opportunity to look to have all of our compliance resources in one place, I think we've got the ability to look a lot broader, because we have all of the responsibility sits in one single place. So I think like what you'll find, for example, one example I could give is wastewater. So territorial authorities dealing with wastewater, historically, we've been a bit inconsistent with the way that we've responded to that, because we've had one team dealing with consented matters at the wastewater treatment plant, and then we've had an incident response team dealing with discharges from the network. So that can be a little bit unhelpful, because those responses can feel a little bit different when the reality is it's one single issue, and that's human effluent going into water. And so that should be the focus. So this is an opportunity for us to establish. I can't go into too much detail because we're running through a restructure process. But what I can say is that you'll see like a focused team on wastewater Inc. We don't care where it comes from, but we want a real wholesome, holistic approach to working with TAs about their wastewater. Well, in fact, very timely, because moving into the CCO scenario is dealing with them and trying to get better compliance. And all compliance really means is better environmental outcomes. So you'll see more focus on things like wastewater, certainly more focus, intensive farming situations. You'll see more resources going into those, the large pig farms, the large poultry operations, those places that rendering plants, all of those sort of industries that can pose a real risk to the environment. You'll actually see more resource going into the compliance monitoring and enforcement of those. And the flip side of that is what you may see is less resources going into some of the more long-term established compliance areas like dairy effluent management. I see that there's less focus in that area because we don't have more people, but we've got a broader spectrum of industries and activities that we're responsible. So I'm sort of taking an approach of balancing it, balancing our resource, all of the industry activities that we're responsible.
I like what our team's doing. I'm just really concerned about the variation across the country, and hence makes me look forward to that part going to.
If I could just make one comment on that, because I know the chair's going to move on. It very much depends on council's funding policies. I won't tell you the councils, but when we went through, the council came with the 80-20. There are some councils out there that have 50-50.
Yeah, true.
And so they've decided that 50% of the costs of their functions will be funded by general rate. It totally then impacts on what happens further down. So funding policies that are set at this.
Yeah, if you can just update us when Patrick comes on what others are doing. Have context.
Right, we'll go to Gary Raymer now. Gary?
Thank you, Gary. Look, I just want to go back to what Ben and Rob were talking about earlier on, Brent, and about about your investigations and prosecutions and stuff. Personally, I've had WRC staff on my farm twice investigating me because of people from outside saying that I was either dumping effluent or doing something, and both times that spent half a day on the farm, 2 people, took my time up, and everything was fine. I said, and when they arrived, I spoke to the people and I said, I want to know who made the complaint, and they said, oh, it was an anonymous complaint. So these are costs to the council. If there was a prosecution or anything went wrong, I would have been charged. But people can make a frivolous complaint and they said, oh, somebody driving past on the road, which is just total BS, because they can't see from the road where my effluent's going or what's happening. And so I think you guys need to have the other side of the coin as well, that when you get a complaint, you get a name and a phone number and an address. So if there's nothing comes up, then you can charge those people for council time. Because if it was the flip coin, we'd be paying. Or we are paying anyway as ratepayers.
I understand the point, Gary, but the law does enable us to do that. But hopefully what your example does demonstrate is that when we get a call, we look into it with an open mind. And in your circumstance, that open mind showed that there wasn't anything to see there, how you've described it, which again is, that's something which is a public good funded matter. People raise issues and we have with an open mind.
Just very briefly, in terms of the contractors, I can understand where you've got consents and you need contractors. Are you also going to use contractors for?
So we currently use contractors for compliance where it's the most efficient way to deliver the service. So for example, Patrick's team, Billy's team currently, a person may just have resigned from being a contractor. We have a person who does forestry compliance for us in the Taupo part of the region. Far more cost effective because that person lives down there to do the work. So far more cost effective for the customer to be having a contractor who's highly skilled in that area, as opposed to trying to engage somebody, train them, and then have them travel down there. So I've heard the point, the general point around some more clarity around where we use contractors. We use contractors when they are more efficient to deliver the service than delivering it through staff. And again, that stuff for the forestry, it's all on charge to the forestry sector.
Right. I'll put in my own 2 bits here now is that I think an important thing is frivolous and vexatious claims is that the council staff, the culture is that we would want to be promoting how can we help you rather than how can we hinder you, and I think that's taken on board truly here. So do we have a mover? Jen? Yep. Okay, Robbie, you go.
I 100% agree with what Gary was just talking about. I've been done for that as well, and Patrick warned me they're coming out, but it's not just what the pressure that puts on me, it's actually the pressure that puts on the staff. It's normally during calving. So it's quite a stressful day that you got accused of something like that. But mine goes back to actually permitted activity. And I hope this changing this directorate around that, you know, I believe permitted activities are a good thing, but I'd actually rather it be the wording be best practice. Like you actually, when you're in a permitted activity, you're not just doing what you did because you're allowed to, you're actually going to do best practice over time. So whatever you're doing is actually going to improve. You're not just going to keep doing this because we're allowed to. We'll actually change our methods and our behaviour to what is best practice over that period of time. So I think that's something maybe our council needs to think about in the future when using permitted activity rules, that we're not just going to keep doing what we normally do, we're going to apply best practice in how we manage that while we're doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. So clearly that just identifies the work that we're doing that's put by the plan. Your comments actually align quite nicely with what the new permitted activity rules are in Plan Change 1 and also freshwater farm plan regulations, because what they require, they say you're permitted to do this, Robbie. What you need to have is you need to have a plan that shows that you are meeting best practice. And so then your plan becomes the thing that you're checking compliance against, which is that you're continually demonstrating best practice.
And continuing on about that, how one person might be polluting in a catchment. You know, we all get farm inspections once in a while, and it's easy to choose in a catchment where someone is highly compliant, slightly compliant, or not compliant. So it's normally, there's normally a direction of travel where to go to.
Thanks for the feedback, everybody. Happy to take any more feedback outside the meeting to help you best when you go into the LTP conversations, because your council colleagues will be looking for you to be giving some feedback around where you see the opportunities for investment to be able to continue to achieve the outcome, which is sustainable management of resources. So thank you, Gary.
Right, move for Jennifer, second Keith. All those in favour, say aye. Carried. Change. We'll go back to Brent again for the maritime. That's all done.
So we're about to hear from our regional hub master, Chris Bredenbeck. So you will recall last year, Chris and Patrick, well, I should say part of the restructural changes that maritime will now be standalone section and will report directly to me as opposed through the compliance section. But one of the little hospital passes that we got was taking over Port Tataroa. We promised that we would come back to you and tell you how that's going. And we thought at the same time it would be a good opportunity to give you a good summary of all the work that's happened over the last 6 to 8 months in the maritime space. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to present you on the operational outcomes for the last year. As I documented in my report, I'm providing an overview of the outcomes from 4 things: Operation Neptune, our ongoing War and Rex project, our response to significant weather events, and the implementation of the Harbour Master function at Port Tataroa. So rather than talk to the specifics of the report, I thought I'd provide a few slides that show what's in the engine room behind the detail in the report. So if we go to the first slide. First slide shows some examples of the type of work that the maritime team encounter on a day-to-day basis. The first image shows a vessel that sunk on its mooring up in the top left there. It required pumping out and refloating, and these types of incidents sometimes put a particular vessel onto the priority list for our derelict vessels. You've got the artistic image in the middle, which is actually the same vessel that you can see my team on the right-hand side there, and those guys are all covered in mud. So that vessel had sunk in the mud on the river's edge at Waitakaruru. It was an abandoned vessel. It was causing a risk to navigation. Its mast would have extended a long way across the channel if it was to roll on its side. So this was an incredibly long day for our team. They were there at sunrise, probably the dirtiest job we've ever completed, with all the clothing requiring quite a few spins through the washing machine at the end. The vessel was also filled with mud, so it required multiple pumps, turning the mud into a slurry and then pumping it out of the boat. It took all day, and as the light was fading and the team were considering abandoning their efforts, it popped up and refloated. So it was moved to a spot where machinery could access it, where it was left overnight, and that's what it looked like in the morning. We expected it to sink overnight. It did so, but it's not filled with mud now, so we can just pop the pumps into it and refloat it before it was dragged ashore. So I thought that'd be just a useful kind of explanation of what you've read in the report about what it means to recover a wreck. The next slide. So this covers a couple of different subjects. So this one's more dealing with our response to significant weather events. So the top right image there, you can see a fairly long log, and this is the sort of thing that we find coming through the rivers and getting tangled up in the mooring fields and tangled up with our aids to navigation. Many of our aids to navigation, like these 5-knot buoys that you can see the team are refloating, they get caught up with logs, they get caught up in high flow, they get dragged out of their locations, and they do require a fair amount of work to get them reinstated. But we've got the balance about right for the weight we attach to them, because whilst they do move in these significant weather events, we don't lose the infrastructure. We can recover it and get it back in place, whereas if it's got too heavy a weight, we tend to have break-offs of the buoys and we lose a bit more gear with a significant extra cost. So since Cyclone Gabrielle, we now carry enough buoys, chains, shackles, block weights that we can deal with 2 significant weather events with our stock inside our stores, and it's proved really valuable this year, as we've had quite a few of these, to get our harbours back in order probably within 2 weeks. We're getting pretty good at it too, unfortunately. The weather has honed our performance in that area pretty well. Next slide, please. So this is the result of a significant weather event. So this is the MV Gleaner. It's been a vessel that's been on our radar in our War on Wrecks project for a little while. So maritime officers have been working with people claiming ownership of this vessel in the months prior to her sinking. It's had multiple ownership changes that are undocumented, questionable in their validity, but it was deemed low risk as it was at the far end of the wharf in a shallow area where it settled into the mud at low tide. Even if it were to sink in that location, it would have limited impact. There was a person living on that vessel that was incredibly difficult to deal with and required police attention during display of violence towards our staff. And it was just an ongoing challenge for us. So sometime before ex-tropical cyclone Vianu, the vessel was moved to a more exposed and deeper piece of water against the wharf. We weren't aware of this. It had occurred, nor do we know who shifted the vessel or why. The vessel subsequently sunk during the storm, probably due to the location it was tied and the exposure to the currents. There's no formal registration system for recreational vessels, and although we have information suggesting who the owner could have been, we're unable to prove any ownership to any person, and anyone with links to that vessel was denying ownership. The wreck required an extensive refloat, and no person took responsibility for ownership. Maritime Transport Act implies regional councils are responsible for wrecks in their region's waterways, and also provides the Director of Maritime New Zealand the ability to direct regional councils to remove wrecks. This wasn't suggested or triggered in this incident, but I just raise it to describe the legislation and the implication that has on regional councils. 3 stages to this one's disposal. Firstly, it was salvage. Pretty big job. Divers required, and it's always expensive in that type of work. Cost approximately $41,500, and it was subject of quite a bit of media attention at the time. Once we salvaged it, though, then we're left with an abandoned and derelict vessel, which needs to be removed from the water, where it was eventually cut up and disposed of last week. Some of that cost was offset by scrap metal, but the removal and scrapping cost was another approximately $29,000. So that single vessel was a very, very substantial imposition on our budgets for the year. Next slide, please. This is an example of a derelict vessel, what it looks like floating on the water. A couple of examples of some of the work this year with a wooden vessel being cleaned up on the beach. Our contractors are very fussy. We spend a lot of time on the cleanup, and once those vessels are demolished and taken care of, the beaches look like they were never there. So it's been quite useful. So next slide, please. That's an example. That I think that one was tropical cyclone Vianu. That's what we see with the Windy app. If anyone's a boatie, they'd probably look at Windy, and it gives a reasonable trajectory of where that storm will go, which gives my team a bit of chance to get out in the days before it through mooring fields, checking top ropes, doing some preventative work with vessel owners that might be at risk to try and prevent them breaking off when these things hit. The image on the right is just one of the photos of some of our infrastructure that we'd had to recover from the shallows, ready for redeployment without losing any gear. So that was pretty useful. Next slide, please. We've talked a little about Tahoe. There's just a couple of images I've taken in the ships in the last few months. I think that's Tahoe, Eos, and Providence. And a token selfie I sent to the team when they were showing off that I actually get on the water from time to time, which was pretty good. The transition has gone really well. I enjoy a really good collegial relationship with the port management staff and the chief marine pilot. We work together regularly on risk assessment. We just last week completed our joint self-assessment against the Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code, which is going through the sign-off process as we speak. So although I'm the only person currently in the council who's qualified to fill the harbour master role, I am supported by a very competent and experienced marine pilot who acts as the harbour master role when I'm unavailable through a contract. So our maritime services team leader, Hayden Coburn, will also be beginning his studies later in the year to obtain a diploma in harbour master, so he can also fill this role, giving us some continuity as we move forward. Next slide. So we talked about that. Brent alluded to the WSL, the World Surf League. This was very short notice that we were required to get out and support. We put in place a temporary maritime event, which was the exclusion zone around the event, and then we policed the exclusion zone, for want of a better word. We had 25 vessels over that period trying to come in and to the exclusion zone, probably to come along and try and get a close watching area, but boat swells have a real effect on the quality of the waves, I'm told. So it was a good event. Very pleased that nobody saw us. We were very much in the background. The fact that we weren't completely obvious means that we're very successful in just keeping the story from the media of some sort of interference with vessels. So next slide, please. Operation Neptune. I reported on the ongoing statistics from that. This continues to be a real success story. It involved this year 39 people, with 27 coming from the wider council to support this high-profile boating safety initiative. We applied for and were successful in securing funding from Maritime New Zealand to support the operation. We got 50,000 towards an education by diversion program, and 11,300 for us to patrol areas not previously covered during Operation Neptune. We rolled out the Safer Boating Forum initiative, the Boy, who's deployed there on the right, and he was deployed right across the region in the busy times, including the Wakaama event in Lake Karapiro. It was a really good conversation starter, actually, and we had people coming to us to learn what was it about, rather than us going to the people on the water. It was a real notable change for us. So we continue to have too many boating incidents and accidents, including fatalities, and that's what Operation Neptune is there to try and reduce and prevent. One feature in recent times has been numerous bar rollovers at Raglan. And this year, Operation Neptune staff are working hard on the water, just trying to educate the public on the risk they face in bar crossing. So next slide. One initiative that we put in this year is that's the Raglan overbridge. So the boats that launch at the reserve there pass through that, and it's just one more visual reminder, and starboard signs to meet those challenges. So it's been a lot of work in our communications and things, trying to raise that risk, but people continue to make bad decisions, and it continues to be a challenge for us. So that's a little bit of a background explainer, I suppose, of the work behind the report, but I open any questions in regards to the report or anything I've raised. So over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Just want to say an excellent report. I guess if I was a consenting and compliance officer sitting at my desk, I'd be jealous of the fact you get lots of photos, and it's much easier to promote your work. I note also that the annual plan, I think last time round, gave more funding for the derelict boats, and that is now proven to be very useful in terms of $69,000 basically it's cost for that one boat.
Yeah, for that one vessel, it's substantial. It really is. So that funding, thank you very much, because that has made the difference for us this year and really making some inroads into the high risk vessels. So it's been fantastic.
I notice it's item number 51. It's actually, there's a lot of vessels that you've done, and most of them have been done for $10,000 or less.
Yeah.
So, and Port of Taiharoa, I wonder sometimes how it feels to be the only harbour master, and now you've got a monster port with huge vessels coming and going, and there was some kind of incident I see with a buoy or contact between the ship and a buoy in January 2026. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Look, that's I raise it in that report because it's an example of how our systems are working really well and the process between it. So it was a minor contact incident, but I think the outcomes are actually the learning in it. So the vessel has it gets very close to the buoy in the mooring process, but through small, I guess, lack of situational awareness, there was a contact. But from that, the process starts of incident, consultation with me, the direction that the vessel gets off the buoy for a dive inspection on the integrity of the structure before the loading continues on, and then the consultation with me through the investigation process was really professional, and there's no concerns of things being hidden or so the process of that was good. I led the debrief at the end and really comfortable with the changes in their processes around buoy approaching and pilotage plans and things. Yeah, it's I think it's an example of a operation that wasn't, I guess, focused on the dollar. It was focused on the safety of the operation. So yeah, it gave me real confidence that if something significant was to happen, we've tested a few of our systems that were in theory before that process. So
right, and they're just picking on that for Brent. There was concern at the time that this was a major shift. We were taking over a port, and there may be insurance issues. I see all the insurance is now funded by Ports of Taiharoa. Is that right? And are you comfortable with how that's been set out?
yep, absolutely. So we had to obtain a policy that extends our harbour master liability insurance to cover this specific port, and then we have just billed that, and bills are sorted and paid, and so the cost to council has been completely recovered from that, and that's just a continuation of the business.
Question from Keith.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Chris. Thanks for your report. Just a first comment. As a boater, I've had a very good relationship with the harbour master. I haven't pinged me for anything, so I'm really relieved about that. But no, I think the culture of the harbour masters around have been really. I've just got a couple of questions there, Chris. The one is, I've been aware of these derelict boats for a long time, and my I guess I'm cavalier. We should tow them out the 200-mile zone and get the Navy to sink them. But can we intervene a lot earlier? Because we every bay, every community knows the derelict ones. Is there any reason we can't intervene earlier or give notice or something like that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Look, the War on Wrecks project started probably 2 years ago, and it's been funded in the last 12 months. So we actually have a proactive list of the most high risk vessels that are obvious to us. So yeah, it is now working, a forward looking project, probably about 12 months ahead. So it takes a long time. The legislation is a little bit slow in allowing us to actually take the action of removing the vessel from the water. But the guys are working very, very hard on trying to pick those most high risk ones. Sometimes the one that sinks isn't the one on our radar, or doesn't look like it's the most at-risk vessel, so we can't get it right all the time. But we've got over 800 moorings out there, and the quality of the vessels in those mooring fields appears to be deteriorating every year, and it's a real challenge. It's a national challenge. It's something that's significant in our Harbour Master forums. Gets raised every year, and everyone's trying different things. So we're doing our best, but with what we've got. But I think the balance is about right. We should get rid of 15 or so a year, based on the last 12 months.
Thanks, Chris. Just a continuation of that. Just talking to the boat repair people and that sort of thing. Every time there's an economic downturn, people neglect the boats first. So it's unfortunately loads Chris and his team up a bit more. But I really believe that we need to intervene a lot earlier, because if I leave a derelict car on the side of the road, not that I do, it's dealt with very quickly. The other thing, Chris, and I've spoken to Brent about this, is the situation at the Thames, the mouth of the Thames, and the Waiha River there, and the wharf, that sort of thing. Like, I know you've had to deal with a boat there recently, but the navigation buoys is obviously something of concern, and they're getting washed out to sea, and they're not replaced regularly enough. And I've spent 2 days with the Commodore of the Sailing Club, so this is all fresh information. And the other part is that the logs and things are not being dealt with probably as quickly as they could be, and in querying them, they do have the capability of moving those logs if somebody was to pay them. So is that something that has been focused on recently, after I've had a little word to Brent on that?
I'll go with, then I'll pass to Chris. So first thing that I'm hearing is whether or not, in terms of the LTP process, Chris came before the council before and said, this is the work program around derelict vessels. With this amount of funding, we can chip away at it. If we were to chip away at it faster, it's a funding conversation, and so we're happy to bring that conversation. If there's a greater rate that you'd like us to chip away at it, then Chris can bring that back through. In terms of the Thames Sailing Club, I'll just say a couple of words and then pass to Chris that we aren't funded as a log removal business. We're there to provide navigation and safety functions, and sometimes that's about just identifying that there's a hazard, as opposed to having funding to remove said hazard. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Chris, because I know that there's lots of expectations that sometimes come from the public and then come through to you as governors. But Chris has funding to do certain things, and that's not to sort out every problem in the coastal marine area. But with that, I'll hand to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. We've assigned our senior maritime advisor to do an assessment at Thames, and he started that in the last week. So there is fresh eyes being looked at the issues raised. There are Thames is an interesting place. It's a privately owned facility. It's a marina. It's a wharf, which naturally gets funded by the marinas and wharfs around New Zealand. In fact, Section 200 of the Maritime Transport Act requires that the owners of those facilities provide aids to navigation. Thames has a long history and an expectation that that we provide it. But it might be that there is a different way of doing this, and perhaps that might be something that comes out of this report. But I'm not going to say what will come through that report until it's done. But I'm just highlighting that there are different considerations there, and you know, the Thames Channel, if we've looked at the costs involved in removing the logs, it's probably something like $60,000 to get what's there gone, and probably an ongoing 40,000 a year, I suppose, to with the amount that comes down that river. So you compare that to my total budget for one area, that's very difficult to justify, I suppose, when we've got really high profile and high risk channels and harbours and stuff around the world. So there's a bit to think about with Thames, but we are going through that process now.
I'll just keep follow up on that. Thanks, Gary. Just thanks for that, Chris. And I just in the discussions I had with Brent, Brent suggested that it was a district council issue as well. So my question to you, Chris, there is it something we need to initiate from Waikato Regional Council, is that we find a solution that works for everybody, or is it you do your report and say, well, it's not it, this is where our budget goes, end of story?
So I'll grab that one, Chris. So when I say district issue, we look at regional stuff. But what Chris is saying is when he looks at the budget that is provided by the council to look at regional stuff, it's hard to prioritise a local pirately owned facility for rates which will come from Te Kuiti, Pupu. It's a challenge. So when I talk about district councils service the needs of their local community, and if that local community says that they want something specific for them, there's an opportunity for them to speak to their district council about something which is local as opposed to regional. So I just wanted to put that the context for that. It's not necessarily that the district council has some sort of lawful legislative responsibility, but they represent their local community. And if their local community wants something which somebody from Te Kuiti shouldn't be paying for, then that's an avenue for them to follow. So, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in scope of this assessment includes the responsibilities and what the Maritime Transport Act sets out in regards to the supply of aids to navigation. So it's in the scope of the report that I expect to see in the next month or so. Yeah.
Liz?
Yeah, no, thank you. Chris, just wanted to say, great report, actually. I don't know how you managed to juggle so many different parts. Now, when I look at just the limited knowledge I have on the different agencies involved in waterways, so MPI on clams, LINZ on, just in my little world, but you've got the coastlines as well, and the extra responsibility around Taharoa. So yeah, just want to actually acknowledge that inter-agency balance that I know that you probably juggle and the fine work that you do. And going back to one of Keith's earlier points, you're trying to balance this compliance and issuing fines, as well as being, a really, I guess, providing education. That is a difficult balance as well. So just want to, hats off to you and the team that you've got behind you. And I just want to add something to what Brent said earlier too, around the interesting articles that you might find in the waterways at times. I want to add horse to that, because I've had experience of pulling a horse out of that Waikato River. So it's not just trees and logs and boats, there's also other things as well. So you never quite know what's going to be, you're going to wake up. So great report,
Thank you. Mine was going back to the derelict vessels. There was a good debate last term. We sat around the table here, and there was we agreed that we needed to put some money towards it. But the issue was there was a small part of the population that has this ability to be in public space and enjoy that environment. And they're the ones that should pay for it. And that was discussed and debated really well around the table. So I think the sooner we can get a cost to those mooring sites, because they're the ones that get to enjoy it, and they should be paying a cost to it to fix these derelict vessels out of the water. And I hope that work is continuing to find a way of charging them for it.
Yeah, we heard that well and truly, and any opportunities that, so Chris has been constantly advocating with government about registrations to be able to provide funding, and so we hear that. We don't want ratepayers to be paying for this either, and so whenever we can find opportunities, we will bring them back.
I don't think that's an argument though. If these need to get out of the water because it's endangering the environment, it's got to be done, and you got to come back to us and say, I've had a budget blowout or something, but it's got to be done. But I think the cost in the future needs to lie with those mooring holders.
Robbie, I think Keith's taken that point on.
Can I just respond to Liz's comment? Really appreciate the comment, Liz, because the team, because Chris has only presented some of it. Chris has to support the police sometimes when they're looking for things other than dead animals, and that's a pretty challenging job for the team. Chris's team stand up to support the Kingitanga when we had the funeral for King Taithia. All these things hit the maritime team, and so just really thank you for that appreciation.
Pippa, we'll move to you.
Thank you, and great report. Just a couple of questions. Are we using technology to plot the derelict vessels at all, GIS or otherwise? Is there a heat map that shows the most high risk, I guess, to contamination for council? Probably going back one, are we covered enough in terms of providing maritime services across the region to the various different parts that I can't see? And Brett, if you could just refer us to which report we should look at for that. And then coming across to Taharoa, are we saying that the once a year reporting is transparency enough, given that they're the only client and we're the only monitor? Is that the industry standard? So I know across the report, but again, much appreciated. Kia ora.
I'll start with the last question first. It's fresh in my mind. So the Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code is what guides the way that we record and deal with the safety issues. It also requires for a self-assessment of our performance against the code, and that's required to be reported to council. So it's an annual assessment against that, which once it's prepared will come back on your agenda for reporting, and then every 3 years there's also a peer review, which is like an audit
I read that, but I'm just saying, is that the standard for all ports around the place, or is that our standard?
Yes.
Like I thought, sorry.
Yeah, that's the standard set out in the Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code. If you'd like.
Yeah,
we can do more, but yeah.
So any quick comment on the change, the dramatic change of the Port Waikato bar, with the new bar being formed through?
Yeah, look, that's a real challenge for us actually. The sand shifting on the west coast has featured more than just Port Waikato, but Port Waikato is a real significant and visual change. So we've been working since the discovery of that, because of course our leads going across the bar are no longer indicating the most safe route across the bar. So we've had to remove the leads, spend a lot of time with Coast Guard. It was being put over the VHF hourly. It's getting recorded into the nowcasting to alert people. What we need is the big flush, the big weather event that will cut its path back through the main channel. Then we can reinstate the leads. But we're assessing it. We're on the water out that way every week or so, flying drones just to see what's happening with that channel. But at the moment, I expected after the rain we had last week that we might have some change. We didn't, so we just keep having to try and alert the public to the risk that they're facing, and working with Coast Guard quite closely around the response to it.
Good, thank you. We'll move on. Do we have a mover for Port Keith? Second, Ben. All those in favour? We'll move on to Tracy's report, please.
So as Tracy moves up, I see we're a little bit behind time, so you come forward, Tracy. But so Tracy's paper, as you'll see, much of it is that we haven't got much to say, except something happened at about 5 o'clock last night that Tracy's not going to, this Tracy is not going to be able to speak to, but our other Tracy, Tracy May, will be able to provide some information to councillors later in the day. But the court released a further decision on Plan Change 1 at about 5 o'clock last evening. So this Tracy isn't able to talk about it, but Tracy May is speaking with lawyers as we speak about what that means, and she'll be able to send some advice through to councillors later in the day. So Tracy, it might be taking your report as read and highlighting the key points.
Thanks, Brent. So, you know, the slide's already out of date, and I did it yesterday afternoon. You know, we have been waiting since the 23rd of April for it, and it's finally arrived, which exciting. Excited, but I like reading to do. Next slide, please. So while we have something's come out about Plan Change 1, we have freshwater farm plans still, and there have been a lot of effort put in during the court appeal process to align PC1 and freshwater farm plans, because they a lot. We do not want people to have plans, and we want it to be easy for people to understand what's happening. Changes that government are making risk there being realignment, and you know, as we get more information, we will work out what that means. So as you may be aware, the government's granted Southland an 18 months extension on their submitting their farm plans just while the national system is finalised. You're expecting to know more about that system in July and August. Brent and I are meeting, and Hamish are meeting with MFE tomorrow at the field day, so hopefully we'll find out a little bit. So look, we are continuing to progress our implementation work program. We are engaging with our stakeholders. Brent and I are spending a couple of days at the field days catching up with people. We're attending the Federated Farmers Breakfast. We are continuing with our catchment information, which I showed you last time. We have heard from the court and from our stakeholders how important and guidance is. So we have been continuing to develop that, because people are going to have lots of different questions at different stages of the please. So, you know, I showed you the registration tool. Those mock-ups are being finalised, and we are getting costings and timings for that. So that is progressing really well. Slide. Same with farm plan integrity. Last time I talked to you, I said we were developing a process. We've developed a process. We are really conscious that there is going to be a process for freshwater farm plan certifiers and auditors, and what that look like, because again, we don't want to anybody. Right. So I have Ben Worth here from Comms, because you said that you were really keen to hear what our comms plan is, and so you can ask Ben questions, but I guess our key theme is that we want to focus on solutions, the common goal, make people feel like they're not doing this alone, and that it is written in a way that people understand. And we're really keen to get your feedback on that, to make sure that, you know, you think that we are hitting the right mark. How you want to do that is absolutely up to you, but we are really, really keen to hear your views. So engagement, look, it's really challenging because there has been so much uncertainty. We know that landowners are facing lots and lots of other issues that is on their radar. So we are continuing to engage with our stakeholder partners. Our big focus is going to be on tranche 1, which is the Merino, and we do not underestimate the challenge that this is going to
spring. It is a catchment which is highly degraded. They all need to have restricted discretionary consents. And so we're going to be putting a lot of time into that catchment and working with our stakeholder partners who, the ones that we have talked to are really keen to be involved because they want to support their farmers as well. Another part, is, you know, we'll be trying a lot of things, drop-in sessions, phased engagement. We will have events that we will run. We will be supporting events that our stakeholders run. We will be hearing from landowners what they want. So, conscious of time, so I will leave it there, but you can ask any questions that you like.
First question from Gary.
Thank you, Chair. You just quickly, I'm a bit like you, Tracy, that I had a lot of questions yesterday, but they're out of date today, so I'll leave them. But have you had a chance to have a look at it, and can you quickly highlight initially some of the changes between the interim decision and the final ruling yesterday? Are you in a position to make a comment on that yet, or is that too early?
I'll grab that one, Gary. So Tracy May will be coming out with something this afternoon because it's a 217-page decision that took a little bit of time for our policy team to get their heads through. But one of the things, Gary, is that the court has called it its final decision, but there are 20 matters that the court has asked for the regional council to get back to it about within the next 30 working days, which takes it out till late July. So there's a little bit of thinking that's needing to happen within the policy team, with the legal team, around what does it mean when the court issues a decision, but then asks for the council to get back to them in the next 30 working days with some responses to certain matters. So Tracy May wanted me to share with you all that she will be endeavouring to get something out to all councillors this afternoon. Hopefully that will answer, but we'll start to answer some of the questions that you've got, Gary.
Thanks, Brent.
Question order will be Keith, Robbie, then Ben.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Tracy. Mine's a couple of comments and questions. So, wearing the hat of the chair of the Growth Council, one of the things that's fundamental to the Waikato economy is agriculture, and just want to request that everything you do maintains the viability of agriculture. To add to that, just in the papers the last couple of days, dairying at the tipping point. We don't get the improvement in the payout, farmers will be break even. So the money's not there. Don't believe the money's there. And most beef farmers, while they've had a good year this year, the costs. So I'm just requesting, pleading that we don't stall the agricultural economy and we take into account that it's, as they said, it's a 60-year program or 80-year program. So in terms of that, the farm environment plans, we need to bring the farmers in gently and with goodwill. And what I am concerned about is when you talk about stakeholders, and this is Brent's heard this and everyone did this in this. Stakeholders actually are the farmers, and the best representative farmers is both Waikato Federated National Federated Farmers, because National Federated Farmers has put a huge amount of resource into this PC1 process, and so I know, Brent, you talked about the judges asked for 20 points to be worked on. We need to make it work. We also need to have the people that are affected involved. So Fonterra is not a stakeholder, in my view, nor is Beef and Lamb, nor is Dairy NZ, it's the farmers themselves. They may be represented organisations, but that's where you need to bring federated farmers into the fold. And I'm like to hear that you've got more than just the breakfast coming up, and also I'd like to hear that some of us farmer councillors in on these conversations, because we've got to get it right.
Yeah, so I can answer that. So I know that Chris reached President up to Brent, and so we had been waiting for the decision, but I got in touch with Chris last week to schedule a meeting to talk about that, and also to talk about. So yeah, absolutely.
One last thing is the Whangamarino action plan. Like here, it's crucial that we get it right, and we also keep the farming viability there. So again, can't emphasize enough that we do it well and properly and equitably, as the PC1 process has been asking.
Robbie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, mine's similar to what just Keith spoke about, that I most probably had an email from Chris Walton, Chair of Federated Farmers Waikato, and Brendan Bull 3 weeks ago with their concerns that they hadn't been contacted of being on a stakeholder working group of implementation of PC1 and the Whangamarino. So I took that to Chris Macleay 2 weeks ago, and his response was, I thought we were already working in that space. And I said, well, obviously not, Chris. So I don't know if you got respond back from that, Brent, from that conversation, but that was about 2 weeks ago.
So we have been working with Federated Farmers for many years, and when Keith was president, remember we would have catch-ups across at the building.
No, but this was actually about a working group for PC1.
Yeah. So we have been engaging, and there isn't a working group for PC1 as you're describing it. I think it's probably pretty important to note that Tracy's team aren't deciding what should be in PC1. The court has decided what's in PC1. So what Tracy's team will be doing is how can they support it's coming to the point that you've made, Keith, about how can they support the rural sector, farmers and growers, to meet the obligations that are coming their way. And in doing that, Tracy will be looking to engage with whomever wants to support the rural sector. It's not about interpretation of rules. It's if Dairy NZ is looking to support the rural sector, then we will work with them to do that. If Beef and Lamb are looking to support their sector, we will look to work with them. If Federated Farmers is looking to report, it's not about choosing people as more important than anybody else. What the team are looking at doing is who out there wants to support the rural sector, and we will work with them. So over to you, Tracy.
My question is, though, why was the CEO so confused of what was actually taking place? Because he believed it was really happening, but it wasn't. So that's the issue. There's like, what's going on? You know, like Chris said, that's actually happening. And I went, no, it's not. So I'm not saying there's silos, but it seems very confusing which is the right information you're meant to be listening to at times. Are those stakeholders telling me the truth, or are you guys telling me the truth of what's going on? And tell you the truth, you can say everybody needs to be involved in a decision to help implement. If you go there, you'll end up back in bloody court again, because everyone will be arguing and fighting. You actually need to take a stance of who can actually really help to implement and work with the landowners that are affected to implement PC1 and just get on with it. Bringing other stakeholders that have no influence and all they're there for is to play silly games, we'll be playing silly games for years, and we don't want that. Don't have to answer it, that's a statement.
Ben? Yeah, question. freshwater farm plans, they've been on the table since I joined council 4.5 years ago. And in terms of a timeline, when do you expect the freshwater farm plans will be actually starting to be implemented?
Good question.
So we're still waiting for central government. We're doing our digital ones. When, I mean, is
So
there-
I'll grab that for you. So the government is saying that it sees freshwater farm plans as being an integral part of their new system.
Right.
Their new system is going to be articulated to everybody when the select committee reports back, and which is why Tracy said the July, August date.
Yep.
Because that's when they're reporting back on the new pieces of legislation. Post that, the government will need to then go through its process of finalising the regulations and making them live. And that'll come with how these regulations are going to form part of their new system. And then they'll have to decide when will they turn them on, because they turn them on through order of council process, Hamish, order council. They turn them on, and because you remember last time they turned them on in a staged way. They are open to talking with us about it, but we will be the recipient of them telling us when they're live. And remember, the freshwater farm plan system is where it's a national system, which is going to look different. You would have seen, do these farm plans need certification or not? Do they need auditing or not? Are they just the industry's farm plans or not? All of that is detail that is yet to come. And so what we're alluding to is that at the end of this year, we will have something with PC1 and we'll have something with freshwater farm plans, and we will have to come back to you to tell you what do they look like together and what does that mean for implementation to support. Again, the fundamental purpose of Tracy's team is supporting the rural sector to meet their obligations. Not do it for them, but to support them to meet those obligations, because there's going to be two separate things coming their way at the end of the year.
So this is, it falls with MFE, who've now been restructured. And are you engaging with them about how these rules might be laid out and whether we are Southland first and Waikato last, or?
As Tracy said, we're meeting with MFE officials at field days. I was in Wellington 2 weeks ago, meeting with officials from MPI and MFE, and fundamentally saying to them what we need is certainty. Because with certainty, we can come back to the council with, this is how we can implement this, and this is how it might need to be funded. And so we have been pleading with them to just give us certainty so then we can plan.
Thank you.
Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Gary, and thanks, Brent and Tracy. The one thing that I would ask and be let us be mindful of is that Waikato Regional Council has the responsibility of interpreting the rules and regulations, and interpreting can be black and white or can have some grey areas in. And in terms of interpreting, what we want to do is put the sheepdogs out there to round up all the sheep and take them in one direction. We don't want to go split them and break them apart. And the mood of farmers when they are financially stressed is not positive. So we need to do it with graceful and far-sighted interpretation.
Jennifer?
Thanks. So end of the year, right? So the election coming up in November, I was just curious whether the whisper from all your meetings are that this is being pushed through with absolute urgency and will be coming out before then, since select committee is only wrapping up by August, or whether this is quite possibly to fall to turn of cycle where it'll probably take another 6 months. Bit of an opinion on things at the earliest. Anybody have any? Speculate
It's a
first.
good question, and you try your best to get information out of officials, and they're kind of tied up pretty tightly by their ministers. My understanding is they want to get this dealt with this electoral cycle.
And they would. I suspect we could be in a situation where we implement PC1, but not have detail of waterfront.
But as you'll be aware, there's quite a significant legislative program of work and getting things before cabinet to get decisions to get out. There's some, that my understanding is they want to get us through.
Wonderful.
I think we'll need to wait and
I
see
hope
what
they do.
comes out with Tracy May and her announcement this afternoon, and then
That part, yeah. Thank you.
then the decision will be whether we get underway with PC2. So, do we have a mover for? Ben? Second? Keith? All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Thank you, Tracy.
As Anna Maria comes, I see we're a little bit behind. We were planning to fundamentally have this paper in front of you for you to be able to pose any questions, really. It's just one of those update papers. I think the key thing that Anna Maria wanted to give you a 30-second update on is since this report was written, how many fast track applications are going on in this region.
Welcome, Anna Maria. The floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. Yes, as Brent said, I've provided a full overview of what was going on in the consenting space last report to EPC, including an extensive overview of legislative changes. So I have still structured the report referring to that, but there is essentially we're in a holding pattern, waiting to see what the larger, chunkier legislative might present for us. In the meantime, we are busy implementing a number of those that came through late last year. So perhaps by the time of the next EPC report, we'll have more to update. Coming back to the consenting space, the services we provide there, yes, the only thing I wanted to perhaps expand on briefly was in the fast track space. It's very fast paced and things are moving daily. So when I wrote this report in the last week, we've had 3 other projects that had applied to the minister to be considered for fast track pathway. They have all come through and to be confirmed that they can proceed down that avenue. So currently, so while there's a summary in the report, currently another way to look at this is that we've got about a dozen projects that have all are all able to pursue the fast track process, and we're waiting them to lodge their substantive applications. Of that dozen or more applications or projects, these 9 of them are land development projects for urban or industrial developments, most around the city periphery, but there's a few and outlying, some up north in the Pokeno area and elsewhere. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to.
Thank you. Just in terms of the water allocation, it's interesting to note that there's more water available now than there was in the past. Most of it in item number 15, there's not much available at Hooker Falls. It's mostly at Karapiro Dam or lower down, but it notes minimum available allocation differs month by month. Does this take account of the super El Nino that's potentially coming and the impacts of drought that we may be facing?
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I
I'll be a
would
friend.
possibly
That's fine.
not.
So I'll grab that. So the impact of the El Nino may be, so the council allocates a certain proportion of the low flow. And so this is basically saying how much water is available left allocated low flow. The El Nino might impact if we hit low flow. And so consent conditions are set in place so that if you hit low flow, people have restrictions. Irrigators might have to drop back on their takes. The towns might have to put in water restrictions, those sorts of things. So the amount of water that we are able to allocate doesn't get affected, but when people might be impacted by their ability to utilise their allocation, maybe, hopefully that helps.
Okay, yeah, so there is now more water available, but if the low flow hits, then
People get it at different rates. There's different prioritisations, for drinking water, high priority, human drinking water, high priority, fire service, high priority, irrigation, lower priority. So that's people get hit at different times. And the reason that there's more water available to allocate is because of the hard work of the people in Anna Maria's team asking people who have got allocations to sharpen their pencil. Do they need all of the water that they're allocated? And often they find that they don't, and they reduce the amount that they're allocated, which makes water available for other people.
good process. Thank you.
Keith?
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Anna Maria. Mine's just I understand the operational challenges of the government putting a pause on consents and how you're managing that, and how things like, obviously I'm farming, and you have the transition of one owner to another. How are you handling that, and how's it going?
So when you talk about the pause on consents, I might be referring to the extensions to duration. So there are a number of applications that regularly flow through and come through up for extension. And so this is moving a bunch of those out for to the end of 27. It's about roughly a third of our workload. And we've been in touch with those parties to confirm that this is a new feature for them. Some people already have applications in train with us, and some have decided to continue, others have decided to pause. So that's what they want to do. The interesting dimension, I think, will be in the new package of there are signals that they will facilitate further extension, and that will present some interesting challenges for us in terms of how that might impact our work. So we're waiting to see how that might play out.
Bobby?
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to Ben's question, Ben, that it's more about water storage, but your question, I imagine, because if you can store water for a month or two prior to that low flow, then you can use it when you want to. So it comes down to the cost, what it would cost to put in that infrastructure to store water for 2 or 3 months. Then you can use it when you want, because you're not taking it out in that low flow time.
Yeah, absolutely, Robbie.
Right, do we have a mover for the regional consents update from Jennifer? Second. All those in favour? So, great. Now we have the
So we have a team of scientists coming to talk with you around patterns in human health risks. At the risk of delaying the process just a moment, I just did want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Mike. Many of you may have heard that Mike is, not sure what the right word is, Mike retiring from the Waikato Regional Council, but might still be around a little bit. But in terms of our, Mike has been an integral part of our science team for a number of years. I think we locally refer to him as our chief scientist. He has this this talent of being able to understand really, really complex things and be able to articulate that to people like myself and others in a very manageable, digestible way. And I just thought, as one of the key people that has been reporting to this committee over a number of years, just really appropriate this time just to acknowledge Mike's service to the council and service to this committee, as he's informed and educated us all over the years that he's been with us. So thank you, Mike.
we'd On behalf of the council too, we'd thank you for your service, Mike, and wish you all the best in your.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Brent. I appreciate
welcome.
that. Really do. I really enjoy opportunities to councillors to share with them the information we have, and yeah, sessions down in the council chambers, lots of robust debate, and yeah, always constructive and valuable. So thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brent. Just to be clear, I've stepping down from my science manager role and looking options at the moment around maybe a part-time role, continuing to work on PC1 implementation and action plan implementation, but that hasn't been signed off yet. But that's my plan. Thank you. Today I bring with me three of our senior scientists. We've got Nikki Wilson, Elder Baptista, and Jonathan Caldwell. And we've put together a compilation of many years, decades of monitoring work, which Ed Brown, as he heads online as well, he and his team have been responsible for collecting a lot of this information. We just thought it'd be really useful to bring together a bit of a compilation. In the past, for this committee, we've sort of brought individual issues. We thought for this training, we're thinking about theming our presentation. So today is about human health risks across the Waikato as it relates to sort of environmental risks. And we're going to cover off air quality, contact recreation, and drinking water. Now you may be aware that with the resource management reform system, government is placing setting of limits, and the government will set limits around human health issues nationally, and these three elements out of that national setting. So we thought we'd give you an overview. I'll just run through the slides quickly. I'll take the report as read. Got the experts here to answer any questions. Air quality, we monitor air quality in airsheds around the region. This is one of the most significant issues in terms of human health effects, direct human health effects, both in terms of people's health and well-being, longevity, and their quality of life. We see air quality issues, particularly not surprisingly in urban issues. We also see air quality issues in parts of the region that are inland, and particularly in wintertime with fuel burning. These are the areas on the map here where the ones in yellow are the ones, the ones in blue are the ones we currently monitor, these air sheds, and the yellow is where we've done monitoring in the past. So we have a reasonably good spread across the region. And just highlighting that for nitrogen dioxide, which is primarily around traffic emissions, we get. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd said I was getting mixed up between nitrous oxide, which is a happy gas, and nitrogen dioxide, which is not. So yeah, NZTA provides that additional funding. We currently have Tokoroa and Taupo classified as polluted airsheds. So that's based on the current standards around PM10. So that PM10 is particulate matter of a size of 10 micron. And there's been some exceedances with Tokoroa being a long issue in terms of that wintertime burning of solid fuel issues with air. There is, as part of the government's plans around limit setting, they're now looking at PM 2.5. So there's much more evidence of a link between PM2.5. So that's much smaller particles. Those are having a direct impact on. So that's where we're likely to go, and we're already starting to do that monitoring. So
Not surprisingly, we do have more of our air sheds that exceed the World Health Organization guidelines. Smaller particles. And also we tend to see exceedances of nitrogen at some of our traffic monitoring. So on a positive, we're seeing improving trends for the particulate matter that's attributed to reductions in emissions from heating, and this council in the past has supported sort of clean burning heating sources in some of our air sheds. We're also seeing improving trends in nitrogen dioxide at our traffic monitoring sites. Like most of our traffic monitoring sites, that's linked to improving fuel and engine technology. And we would expect that to continue as the production of electric vehicles increases. We do, not surprisingly, we see particular hotspots in Hamilton. And this is just the picture there's at the section of State Highway 3 and State Highway 1C. By the hospital, that's a particular hotspot where we're quite some time. I guess that just highlights how important one of the roles we have is in providing this information, and also in our submissions to urban planners around protecting vulnerable populations. I think Jonathan in his report highlighted ensuring that we're not citing daycare centres, for example, vulnerable population or old people homes close to these known hot. Moving on to contact recreation, and Chair, if it's okay, I might just go through these and back and get questions at the end, if that's okay. We monitor through the summer from November to April at around 60 locations, and that's across rivers, lakes, estuaries, and open coast. And these are places where people are recreating actively, wanting to get out, enjoy fresh water and seawater. We have 3 different indicators. 2 of these are indicators of fecal contamination, so enterococci in estuaries and open coast, and E. coli in estuaries, rivers and lakes. So these are indicators of fecal contamination from blooded animals, birds, ruminants, humans, etc. The other key indicator is cyanobacteria, where we monitor the levels of toxic algae in our regional lakes, not in Taupo, but in many of our other regional lakes, and also along the hydro lakes. And you'll be well aware of the issues we've seen increasingly over the last few years with cyanobacterial blooms in some of our hydro lakes, but also in many of our shallow lowland lakes. Overall, for the 25-26 season, quite a few of our popular swimming areas are really good most of the time. Often, if you get rainfall events, you'll get peaks in fecal contamination, and we provide a blanket warning for people not to swim direct after those rainstorm events. The Waikato hydro lakes and regional lakes tend to be unsuitable for contact recreation because of those high levels of cyanobacteria. And most of our smaller rivers and streams are not suitable for contact recreation due to high levels of E. coli. We also do long-term grading, and we've got excellent or good water quality at the coast and Lake Taupo, not surprisingly. Waikato River is fair for most sites, and poor swimming water, regional rivers, lakes and estuaries. That's over the long-term grade. We report these results to Te Whatu Water. They then have a responsibility for providing the public with warnings. We also make all of this information available through the LAWA website along with the other regional councils. And so there's those public issues. Mafalda and the team are working on reducing the amount of time it takes to get results. It's always challenging when we're out. Ed and his team are out sampling. They collect the samples that come back, gets analysed. There's always going to be a lag between collecting the samples and providing that information back. So we are looking at ways that we could speed up that process or provide people better ways to evaluate the safety of bodies for swimming. Part of that is also about providing better signage, and the Upper Waikato algal response group that's been going for a couple of years. That's one of the focuses there, is making sure that the community gets good information as quick. Won't spend too much time on here. These figures, I think they're all on the but essentially the amount of green on the left is highlighting really good places to go swimming. The red is where we're seeing issues. So this is the Waikato River. I like to swim at Hamilton Gardens, and you can see it's green all the time. So often people think Waikato River at Hamilton is polluted and isn't safe to swim. That's not the case. Hydro Lakes, here you can see the oranges and the reds from the cyanobacterial blooms. These are many of our smaller streams and rivers across the region, mostly and reds. And similarly, our lowland lakes or our mid lakes that we monitor are poor, other than just got a population site. Lake Taupo all green, other than I think one site, so there can be issues at times, even in a lake like. And our estuaries, it can be a bit hit and miss, particularly with rainfall events, and similarly with our coasts. Most of the time, the coasts are really good, but after rainfall, particularly near the outlet of rivers, that can be a problem. And then finally moving into drinking water in the Waikato. So obviously this is a major health issues associated with drinking water sources. There's also a lot of national interest in the funding for infrastructure to improve drinking water quality. I think there was a story on Radio New Zealand this morning that you know about, which was about one of the schools at Aka Aka, in one of our monitoring wells is actually up at that school, where the principal was talking about government putting funding into structure for school drinking water sources. So it is a major issue, and as you can see from the map, a large number of people and relies on drinking some sources. Many of it, a lot of it comes from the river, from the lake, and also a significant proportion from ground. In our groundwater, this is something the council's been interested in for quite some time. I think Councillor Nicol probably remembers multiple presentations to this committee on nitrate issues in groundwater. The colour scheme there sort of highlights where we tend to have concentrations of issues of exceedances of nitrate above the drinking water standard, 11.3 milligrams per litre. And that tends to be around Pukekohe and also that upper Hauraki Plains area and around Hamilton as well. So it tends to be focused where we've got either vegetable growing, horticulture, and intensive pastoral farming. But for much of the region, much lower nitrate levels. Another issue there, which has sort of come to prominence in the last couple of years, although it was previously a lot more prominent, was around arsenic in our waters. A lot of our drinking water sources that are associated with geothermal areas tend to have high arsenic levels, and that needs to be dealt with through treatment. So generally, treated drinking water is compliant, but there are sort of known risks around the region with areas that have natural arsenic levels. Other risks to drinking water include microbial contamination. So there are various ways that E. coli can be picked up in groundwater, and obviously some of the disease-causing organisms like Helicobacter and others. Metals and pesticides, that is something we take part in national screening for. Also around emerging contaminants, and even seawater intrusion can impact on groundwater quality. So across the region, those that map on the right shows the numbers of bores, bore consents that have domestic or household supply associated with them. So you can see that groundwater is a massive resource for drinking water across the region. And the quality of that drinking water really relates both to the land use around the bore and the aquifer, but also the natural factors, the geology underlying everything. Nitrates are a major risk for groundwater drinking sources. We tend to see more issues around microbial and algal risks in surface water. So our work across the council and land management, our ongoing work around monitoring, and also emerging work that we're doing around source water protection, protecting that source. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it at that.
Questions from Ben?
Yeah, good on Mike. I'm just interested in moving forward in the next couple of years. So with drinking water quality, how much is that going to be monitored or controlled by the water entities, and how much is it going to be regional council?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think our responsibilities, and I'll add into this, but our responsibilities are around mapping the source zones and obviously putting in place controls around what happens with the source zone. Obviously, the entities themselves have the responsibility of providing safe drinking water to their consumers. We also are required to provide best information available to those water. Is there anything you'd like?
So they're responsible for prosecuting if water isn't up to standard, or is it us, or where does that fall?
So Taumata Arowai.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're the regulator of drinking water.
Right, so they now stand in the middle of this.
So they would, if it's my understanding, if a supplier wasn't doing their job, they would answer to Taumata Arowai.
Good enough. Yeah. Is this on?
Just pull it close.
So we are responsible for not so much the drinking water, but we monitor source water in general. As a drinking water supplier, they have requirements under the Services Act to monitor both their source water and the water they supply once it's been treated. So there's a few levels of protection there. But ultimately, the drinking water suppliers are responsible for the water they supply to the people drinking it.
Right. So is there much interface between what we do and what they do, and is that going to increase in future?
There's so as a result of the Havelock North crises, the Water Services Act was kind of reviewed, and there are a whole lot of new regulations come out, and Taumata Arowai was established. So it's still being worked out exactly how everybody interacts with each other.
Right.
And as a regional council, we do regularly Taumata Arawai. Our responsibility, as Mike mentioned, is to define what we call surface water risk management areas, which is basically a polygon on a map
Right.
around the drinking water source that we then can have various rules in our plans to control the activities that happen within that. How exactly it works with then how we are notifying suppliers, and that is still coming
Still
out
on the
wash
way,
at
yeah.
the moment.
Good, thank you. Just in terms of the swimming water quality, that's something we've been doing for some time. What happens in Auckland where you've got a unitary council, because they have quite frequent closures of beaches? Does one part of the council tell off the other part of the council, given that it's a unitary, and that, you know, there's not going to be that difference between the separation of powers?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I think,
It isn't a question for you to answer,
Yeah.
Mike, and it's probably a question that you maybe ask it again in public excluded, and Patrick will give you a bit of a conversation then. But fundamentally, that's a challenge, and it's possibly something that I was alluded to earlier about government having decisions about where it wants compliance actions to be undertaken, because you'll see challenges where you have that occurring. So, yeah.
Cool. So finally, just in terms of air quality, it looks like you're heading towards 2.5 would become something that may be part of the RM processes. If that happens, there's many more places in Hamilton City, for example, as well as Tokoroa and was in Putaru was in there. Will that mean that people have to upgrade their heating devices? What impact will 2.5 have, and in terms of potential ongoing costs for council?
Yeah, it will have an impact because PM 2.5 is a more stringent guideline if we adopt the World Health Organization guideline as a standard in New Zealand, which, Ministry for the Environment is still making decisions around those amendments to national environmental standards, but I would guess it would be fairly unlikely that they'd stray too far away from what the World Health Organization is recommending as guidelines. So a lot more of our airsheds struggle to meet PM 2.5 as a guideline or standard compared with the older PM 10 standard. So we would obviously need to look at how where we might need to spend money to actively improve airsheds that are not compliant. And there may be more issues with actually resource consents. Maybe better technology may need to be applied to ensure that their discharges are going to meet the requirements of the standards. And also, yeah, we would need to look at introducing wood burner in our regional plan, or whatever that might look like under the new RMA process. Whether as part of the process, national standards around wood burners are introduced. I mean, currently there is under the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality, wood burners have to meet a certain particulate emission standard, but it only applies to wood burners that were installed from 2005 onwards. And also it doesn't apply to multi-fuel burners, such as burners that would burn wood or coal, open fireplaces. So they're reasonably generous, not very strict as they currently are set, but I would suggest that there may be stricter wood burner rules.
Right. So which might have an impact, and also potentially if it's PM 2.5, also on industrial emissions as well.
Yes, that might also have implications for charges from industry.
How soon will we know what they're going to put in the RMA?
Under the National Environmental Standards that sit under the RMA currently, which I am it looks like those NES standards will be taken across into the Natural Environment Act.
Yep.
And as part of that, I imagine they will be introducing PM 2.5 as standard. But so I think we will still have national environmental standards for air quality, and it will new standard and likely a new nitrogen dioxide standard as well.
Right, so post September or whenever we'll get a report back of the implications of once we know.
Yes, once we know, but you know, these things taking a while. They are starting to roll out some new national environmental standards and some amendments. So I think that the air quality standards will be off the cab.
Thank you.
Question from Keith.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, guys, and all the best, Mike. You and I have had many fat pig on it over the periods of times, and one thing I've really appreciated is the absolute honesty and integrity. So, appreciate that. Mine's a mixed bag of questions. One is just trying to get a feel, because I just looked on the national standards, and some were introduced in 2019 and some in 2022. To me, they're getting more stringent. In the terms of a curve, are the standards getting more stringent? So we are less able to meet those standards. What's going on? I'm just trying to get a feel so that you talked about you just talked about the international standards. Are they really applicable to New Zealand as well?
So with the World Health Organization guidelines, they were updated in 2021, and that was an update since 2005. Those new guidelines are based on much more evidence, epidemiological evidence around the health impacts of air pollution. And then obviously our national environmental standards came out in 2005, and now they are quite out of date. So it's really based on scientific evidence around their health impacts. So the indication is that we will stringent standards or guidelines. Whether it comes to a point where we can achieve those, because there's also contribution from natural background as well, which is something we can't really.
Just to add around nitrate, and again, we've had questions over the last 6 years or more in this chamber around groundwater nitrates. The current levels, the standard, if you like, at 11.3 is there to protect against baby syndrome. There is evidence internationally that that in the future that the body of evidence will get to a sufficient level of quality and breadth to identify that a lower nitrate standard is to protect against things like cancer and other cancers that have been linked or been associated with high levels of nitrates. So that's where, the science is sort of still a bit uncertain in relation to the nitrate level. As that science builds, it's all the standards are more stringent.
Yeah.
And to remember, from a human health perspective, it's linked back to risks of health impact.
So thanks for that, Mike. The other one is just, excuse my pronunciation, but cyanobacter to me seems to be more a hydrological problem, because the water's not moving, it's not getting oxygenated and that sort of thing. Is this something that we have to live with, or is it something that we can actually manage we can't manage the peat lakes and that sort of thing because there's limited flow in the summer, but like in the dams and Waikato River and that sort of thing, is it something that we can just flush it out every so often and overcome it? Because it's seen as we've created the problem, and the other part is well, we actually have because is it the dams or other factors. And I'll just put in there as a side thing talking about, Brent doesn't want to talk about now, but I see it's 343 urban discharges into our waterways. That's, to me, it's unacceptable, and of wastewater per year. So maybe we've got to start looking at that as well.
I might hand that over to Mafalda, but if I just say our messaging to council and to the public is that the cyanobacterial driven by hydrology, by nutrient levels, and by the fact that we're seeing climate conditions that favor those. Okay. So it's an interaction of those three, and we as a council can manage sources of nutrients. Its impact on and and even less on
I can talk about, you've mentioned Mike, Waikato algal in meeting with many stakeholders, other district council, and also with Mercury. So that's something that we have raised with them, and they indicated that they can look at their data and do some modeling regarding the hydrological conditions in the river. The biggest problem seems to be the height at which the water is taken from those hydro dams. So one of them is actually from the bottom, Marae Taiwan, yes, and the other ones are around 15 to 20 meters. So one of the things that we identified is that we need more data for the lake system. So we, at the State of the Environment reporting, we probably gather good data regarding what the river is doing, but not so much what the lake is doing. So, for example, one of the outstanding questions is whether or not the lakes are stratifying, whether we have an upper layer and the bottom layer that don't communicate. And if that is the case, the height at which in the dams you can flush the water might not be appropriate to get rid of the blooms. So that's definitely something we would like to explore with all those stakeholders.
Yeah.
Okay, Jennifer.
Hey, sorry, I've got to pop out in a minute. I just wanted to say thanks again, Mike, and everything. I can see over the years having received these, it's really great to see that as well. Obviously, we have had action in the air quality space, and we don't do that activity anymore. Great to see the trends improve. And it's excruciating as slow how that NESAQ is just not progressing, but hopefully one day. The water related issues is obviously a whole lot of activity happening, and so I guess I'm wondering where is the next piece that regional council has a role in human health, and I do keep coming back to, are we monitoring the things we don't know yet? Are we, like the emerging contaminants has been a long-standing issue for me. Have you got any comments on that, that we are currently starting to do? Because one in particular that I think about is, for the next paper, the wastewater treatment plants, for example, the sludge from that is being spread in a variety of places over. And I just wonder, with all the products that we have these days, of what is in that sludge, and is it going on food producing land, or one day food producing land, that stuff. So is there a space for us to do some work?
I think there is. So we see within our budgets, we have to balance. We've got our state of the environment, and that tends to focus on the things that have traditionally and currently been on our community. So drinking, recreation, etc. So those we're responding to, monitoring things that very high level of interest. From a science perspective, there's also an important role for us in investigations into issues, whether that be acid sulfate soils, like on the arsenic and these are things that, if the community knew more about, they would probably bump them up.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Priorities. So there's sort of that dual role of providing good monitoring data for the things that the community is about now, but also keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's anything that could come in future to inform us councillors. It could be so that we can think about it because we don't know about it. That makes sense. So thank you for that. There you go.
So we're currently participating along with PHF Science, which was formerly ESR, a national survey of emerging contaminants, and they do that once every couple of years. So that will include in groundwater things like pharmaceutical, caffeine, PFAS, and that's done in collaboration with all the rest.
Yeah,
So
that's
that-
interesting to see one day.
So that's happening this year.
Cool.
Probably just one thing to add. Last year, the EPA undertook a PFAS monitoring project along the length of Waikato River, upstream and downstream of wastewater treatment plants and water takes. The good news there was they had low detection levels. As it all opened up inside.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
With that, we'll, do we have a mover for the? By Jennifer. By Keith, all those in favour, so.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, councillors.
We'll take a 5-minute break now. Chair needs.